Hello and welcome to Square Raindrop. I'm Jo Wheeler.
And I'm Steph Galter. I look a bit warmer than you, Jo. What happened?
I cannot tell you how cold it has been on the East Coast this week. It is perishing. I mean, all the weather forecasts are blithely sort of saying, oh, the East Coast will be a little bit cooler. Yeah, what they don't actually say is 10 degrees cooler than the West. And to go with that, we've got a brisk northeasterly wind. So if you weren't cold to start with, the wind comes in and you're going, oh no. I went out for a dog walk. First one I thought, I'll take my jumper. And then it was like, do you know what? I'll change my ballet flats and I'll put my socks and boots on. And it was like, no, I'm not going to survive this without a coat. And then even when I was out, I was hoping that my gloves were in my pocket. And now I'm actually sitting on a heated mat. I'm that cold.
I have to say, my sister lives in Peterborough and she backs you up, Jo. She said she had the heating on last week. It was so cold. I was like, Vicky, it's June.
I'm not surprised. Of course, we are now in meteorological summer. And usually when people think of high pressure in summer, you think of sunshine, blue skies and high temperatures. Why isn't it like that, Steph? Explain.
Well, it depends on where the high pressure is. You've got to have your air from a warm direction, but this high pressure is up towards our northwest, so the winds are coming around it, coming down from the north and hitting the east coast and actually squeezing down the south coast as well. So by the beaches in the southeast, it's really quite chilly at the moment as well. For you, though, as well as the winds coming down from that direction, bringing in some cooler air, there's also a lot of cloud over the North Sea. There's a lot of moisture in the North Sea, weirdly enough, being a sea, and it's given a lot of cloud. And that cloud then filters in during the night, and then the sun gets to work, burns it all back towards the coast. But it can't work miracles. It's a cold air. It can't do as much as it wants to. So the East Coast still stick around with that cloud. So that's what you're under, Jo, that cloud.
Thank you very much. And I shall be very grateful when it goes. In the meantime, as forecasters, we've pretty much got to the stage of doing the knitting because it is beyond tedious. It's the same thing every day. And yes, I know it's cloud chasing. And that's literally, isn't it? The difference between a warm sunny day and a really cold, cool one and cloudy to boot. Because that cloud burns back. Sometimes it burns back well. Sometimes it doesn't burn back as well. And it's just subtle shifts in the position of that high pressure, which tell us how far inland that cloud is going to come.
So what have you been doing then other than knitting, to alleviate the boredom this week?
I have been playing with my air fryer. Now, I was late to the party with this.
Air fryer?
Yes. Now, apparently these were really, really popular during lockdown and everybody says how fantastic they are. And I did actually have one of the original ones. I had an active fryer, which was really good. But everybody was talking about the versatility of these new ones that have 2 drawers. And so Julie, my Ninja dual oven arrived. And since then, I have cooked just about everything in it. I mean, it's brilliant for bacon, sausages, chips, all that kind of thing. I made Vietnamese chicken in it last night and beetroot.
Beetroot. Well, that's an eclectic mix. I, on the other hand, have been looking after children mostly because their school decided in their infinite wisdom that having 3 bank holidays and half term wasn't enough for May. And instead, they thought they'd have an inset day at the beginning of June as well. So on Monday, we headed off to Marwell Zoo. And as I walked into the tropical enclosure, the lady there in the sloth house said...
sloth? Is it sloth or sloth?
Well, I say sloth. What do you say?
Got to be honest, don't use the word every day. In fact, pretty rarely. My brother has a lovely saying that somebody is as slow as a long-toed sloth or sloth on Mogadon. But I can't even remember what he says. Isn't that sad? Anyway, sloth or sloth, they are beautiful little creatures.
Exactly. And we walked into the house of said animal and the lady there said, you have picked the perfect time to come. At which point the mist sprayed in her face and she went, oh, it's slightly raining. And then she pulled herself together and said, the sloth has been inside all day and he's just now decided to move out of his house. And we saw him climb all the way across and then down and start munching on some food that they set aside for him. It was amazing. Never been so close to a sloth.
Oh, how fantastic. I don't think I've ever seen one in real life. But thankfully, we've got your little clip here.
Sorry. Felix, can we wake up, baby? Please. Felix. Sorry. Come here. There he is. There's
is old Santos the Sloth.
Santos the Sloth. Well, whilst we're talking about such names, tell us about Storm Oscar.
Yes, so while all the weather presenters have been slipping into a coma, trying to think of new ways to say cloud coming, cloud going, wax on, wax off, a little storm has formed that's been affecting the Canary Islands and Madeira down sort of west of Africa kind of way. It's been named as Oscar and it's now heading northwards towards us. So it will change our weather. Hooray!
For the better or for the worse?
For the worse.
Ah, okay. We'll come back to that. Let me just ask you, who's named this storm? Because when we have these named storms, they're always named by one Met Service or another. And this one's coming from the south, so it was...
Spanish. It's the Spanish Met Service who have named it.
Okay. Now, I do happen to know that the Spanish and the Portuguese are very keen on giving people long names. And that's why for anything formal, you have to give your parents' names and your grandparents, because they've got so many similar names that unless you go back a couple of generations, you can't actually establish who's who. So I can't believe they just called it Storm Oscar. Wasn't it Storm Oscar does something else?
No, it was actually just Oscar, but I do completely agree with you about the naming thing. My other half is from Argentina. So our first child, he wanted to name after both our parents. The child was a boy. He wanted to call it Jose Luis Brian. I had to say, no, for the sake of bullying at school, we cannot call him that.
Jose Luis Brian is just the most fantastic name ever. Nobody would ever forget him. Years from now, we'd be meeting up with people and they're going, I knew a Jose Luis Brian in school. Was it you? Yes, of course it was.
There's only one.
Oh, well, that was a lucky escape for him. So, yeah, we're seeing in a lot of the media, everybody's going, heat wave at the weekend. London's going to have temperatures 26, 29 degrees Celsius. I'm going, hold your horses, guys, because whilst, yes, that's nice and warm, you may not have the weather to go with it. So what can we expect at the weekend, Steffi?
Yes, with one hand we giveth, with the other hand we taketh away. So yes, it will be warm, but it comes with muggy, murky condition, a lot of cloud and some thunderstorms and potentially some flooding as well.
Right. Great. There's something to look forward to once the cold goes. And now here's the interesting bit. Once that storm leaves our shores, do we get the high setting back in again? I mean, what's the longer term forecast looking like? I know you don't like these.
Well, interesting you should say that, Joe, because the Met Office have released their 3-month forecast, their forecast for the summer.
Okay, and it says?
Well, it says 50% chance of near average temperature and 45% chance of hot weather and 5% chance of cool.
Okay. Based on what? On what?
On an average year, it does take a bit of explaining. On an average year, you'd expect the run-of-the-mill average to be about 60%, with the outliers, 20% is really cold weather, 20% is really hot weather. So any change from that tells you how much more likely it is to be on one side or the other. So if you've got 50% chance of it being average, that's a bit below the 60%. But on the outlier, the hot should be around 20%. But they're going this year for 45, which means there's a greater chance of it being hot than there would on a normal year. Does that make any sense?
No, not really, because it may be quite a long time since I addressed my mathematical capabilities. But for me, 50% was average. Why are we talking about 60s?
You need a little graph, Joe. I hope you had a nice big breakfast this morning to get your brain into gear. Let me draw you this little chart. So you've got a little loop there. There's your bit at the top. There's your bit at the bottom, bit in the middle, 60%, top bit 20, bottom bit 20. There you go.
Okay, that all makes sense now. Not
clear as mud.
And is it just the heat that they look at, or they look at the rainfall, anything else? You know, sunshine, anything that might be useful.
Yes. So they don't just look at temperature. You would feel slightly shortchanged in that respect, but they just look at temperature, precipitation, rain to you or I, because you're not going to get snow, and or hopefully you might, or wind speed. And what they're saying is 65% chance of near average precipitation. So that's a little bit more than your 60 run-of-the-mill box average kind of thing. So chances are it's going to be average amounts of precipitation, and wind speed 75% chance of average. So that's even more. So good chance.
Okay,
But
and
it is
it is
probability, so nothing is set in stone because it is a forecast, and we all know it descends into chaos.
and at the end of this 3-month period, does anybody revisit those figures to say whether they were good, bad, close to the mark, or completely off the scale?
There's a lot of science in there. So at the end, they will look at how it differed, how accurate it was. And now with weather, there's a lot of machine learning as well. So even if you don't know the exact physics behind why something happened and you can't get the equations to figure it out, what they do is they look at the general trends and they can do the machine learning on that instead. So it's really very, very clever. But for you and I think we should just come back in 3 months and have a look.
We'll do that. Yeah, because I know that you don't trust those long-term forecasts anyway, not until you see the whites of its eyes.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Get
Well,
to
here-
Friday and I start getting goosebumps. I start getting all nervous, come out in hives.
Well, I'm just hoping for slightly brighter conditions before the weekend gets muggy and horrible and hot. But we shall meet again in a week. And in the meantime, if anybody wants to contact us, it's at...
Square raindrop, because square raindrop didn't fit.
And the email...
The email.
Brain the size of a planet, memory the size of a garden pea, and a petit pois at that.
Weather@squareraindrop.com.
Till next time.
Don't get struck by lightning.